In the en route phase, chapter 22. And as we go through this, something that I just want to make sure that you guys are aware of. You can go in and watch these courses as many times as you want. From this point forward, and perhaps even some of the classes before, you're probably going to want to go back and watch these at least another time. There's going to be information that we go through that it may be the first time you've heard such things, and you may have to think about it a little bit before it can kind of sink in. So just keep in mind that because of the reading that you're doing and then me talking about it here, this is kind of new information. So I just want you to know that you can go back and watch these as many times as you want. Also remember, texting, emailing, whatever, I'm available. So with that, guys, we're going to pick things up here on the en route phase. Now remember, you've got the departure element. So you've got all of your planning, you've got, all of your skills building, your proficiency, the legalities, you're ready, the airplane's ready, your passengers are ready, everything is ready to go. You've got your departure, you got your clearance, you're taking off, you're flying out of the airport environment, and now you're ready to head to the en route phase. That's where we are. Those are the two big sections that connect A to B with wherever it is that you're going. And remember, in the instrument world, it's not necessarily A to B, it could be A to B to C to D to E. Okay, so keep that in mind, and here we go. Now, a couple of things here, and you can read from this, is that, what the en route phase is. We'll pick up here on the radar service portion. The radar service, remember, is that ATC is there to help separate traffic in the IFR world. So when you are on an IFR flight plan as an instrument-rated pilot in an aircraft that is instrument certified, then you can file IFR, fly in the IFR system, and it's being in the rocking chair. You've got people that are helping to kind of watch out for you and keep other airplanes away. With ADS-B and traffic and all of this, to me, it provides a much safer element to fly around the country. So that's kind of what IFR is. So when you're leaving the airport, you're talking to the tower. Tower will transfer you to departure. Departure, as they say, whatever it's going to be, 141 Hotel Lima, contact departure on 123.8. 123.8 for 141 Hotel Lima. You wait just a second, you switch to the frequency, you listen for just a little bit. Then once you know that you're not going to step on someone, you call up departure. Aspen departure, oh my God, I forgot what kind of airplanes we fly. I was going to say stationary, but that's not right. You'll say Diamond Star 141 Hotel Lima with you, departing Aspen to wherever it's going to be. And they'll come back to you and they'll say something along the lines of November 141 Hotel Lima, radar contact 5 miles northwest of Aspen, say altitude. And so what you'll do is you'll look at the altitude you're passing through, and let's say that you're passing through 8,200 feet, but your assigned altitude for the initial phase has been 14,000 feet. So what you'll tell them is you'll say, we're 8,200 climbing for 14,000 or 14,000. And that's what you'll say. So you'll let them know that you're climbing up and to give them the altitude. And by this time, you've already got your squawk code, you're already in the system with that, and then they can give you advisories as they need to, or in some cases, vectors to either help make your transition easier or to kind of make things a little safer for you by keeping stuff away from you. So just understand kind of how that works. So you have the en route clearance. This is that portion that they give you in the CRAFT component of what it is that you get for your takeoff clearance. So with that, you will know what to expect. But remember, you can get anything. You can get this and you can have all of these plans, and then 10 minutes into your flight, they can give you GPS direct, and then you change everything up and off you go. So just know that that's kind of how it goes. All of these things here, you kind of have to remember. These are going to be some of the test questions. If they give you an altitude assignment, you need to get there as soon as practical. If they tell you to climb, you need to begin your climb pretty quick. If they tell you to descend, you need to start descending pretty quick. You don't want to be delaying too much on altitude assignments or on heading assignments. Remember, it's within your right to accept or to deny some of these requests, but if you do deny a request, you need to have a plan. Also, if you accept the request, if that makes sense for your flight and does not put you in harm's way, you need to get on about the business relatively quickly of doing what they've asked you to do. Make sense? Operating on a composite flight plan, we talked about this briefly a few weeks ago. A composite flight plan allows you to take off VFR and transition to IFR. This all sounds well and good, and a composite flight plan it's been there and it's on the books. People know what a composite flight plan is. However, the practical application of a composite flight plan, I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me. Forgive me, the allergy season down here is in full swing. So it all sounds great and it makes a lot of sense on paper. The practical application of it is that sometimes people are not as comfortable with it as you might expect. And when I say people, I mean ATC. So it may be the kind of a thing that you may have to leave VFR, and then you have an IFR flight plan that you have set up somewhere else that you will pick up when you get to that waypoint and activate then. Before that, you may not be on a VFR flight plan, but you're asking for flight following. So you're still kind of in the system, but you're not on a VFR flight plan, because in some cases they have a hard time. With giving you a VFR flight plan and then the IFR portion of your flight plan. In my experience, it's been a lot easier to do what I suggested before, is when you leave the mountains VFR, you're getting flight following when you're high enough to get flight following, and then once you get out to an area where you know that you're going to be able to get picked up in the system, and you know that you're going to be able to comply with the MEAs along the routing that you get, then you can activate your IFR flight plan. If you're in heavy metal, if you're in something that's a fast climber and you're able to get up and out a lot quicker, then filing that IFR flight plan from the beginning may be a great idea. However, there are some exceptions to that. Las Vegas, Nevada is notorious for sending you way out west before they send you way back east. And it depends on winds, it depends on the conditions, the push, coming in from the southwest and elsewhere around the world, basically there. But if you fly to Las Vegas for something and then you want to fly home, back to the east, a lot of times on an IFR flight plan, they're not going to let you go east before they send you way the heck out to the west. So what do? I have an idea. Let's fly VFR out to the east and then have our IFR flight plan that's set for you to pick up at some waypoint east of Las Vegas. So that's a way that you can kind of do it. There are some other examples about why you may want to do that, or even the opposite is true. Let's say that you're coming in and you're beginning your approach and your arrival and it's severe clear. You can see forever, you know the place, you know the airports, you know the vicinity, and you know that for you to begin the approach, they are going to vector you all over the doggone place before they can get you to the airport and get you landed. Well, what you might want to do is to go ahead and cancel with ATC, cancel your IFR, continue VFR, and then that way you can fly directly to the airport, enter the traffic pattern to the airport, and then land, and it can save you 10-15 minutes, not to mention, however many gallons of gas with that. So just know that you've got pros and cons by doing that. When you do that, now you don't have separation. They will not hang on to you. They'll say radar services terminated, squawk VFR, have a nice day. So when that happens, you're no longer in the system. You turn your transponder now from whatever your squawk code has been, let's call it 4236. You change it from 4236 to 1200 now because that's the VFR squawk code. And now you're sort of on your own to see and avoid other aircraft between you and that airport where you're going to land. So It's kind of one of these things. If you need to do some of the approaches, if you need that to get that done in the 6 months that you have to do, your 6 approaches and things, then you may want to go ahead and shoot the approach, because you have to log so many in 6 months anyway. But sometimes that's available to you if you want to use that. So just know that that's out there. All of these bullet points are all things that you're going to need to know. Position reports. So when you're in the system and you're in radar contact, they know where you are. Unless you're not in radar contact. If for whatever reason that you are in a non-radar environment, then you're going to need to give full position reports. These are test questions. So what is a full position report? You give your aircraft identification, your position, like over what VOR, what radial, where you are, what time it is, Zulu, what your altitude is, specifying VFR on top if appropriate. We'll talk about that here in a second. You read about that already, right? So with this, your altitude, what kind of a flight plan? It's not necessary if you're in contact with approach, because they know that you're on an instrument flight plan. Your estimated time of arrival and name of the next reporting point when you're going to check back in with them, and the name of the following reporting point and any pertinent remarks that you have. So there are some mandatory reporting points that you'll see with black triangles, etc., and you'll see what all these are once we get to another portion of this chapter here. But these are position reports. So these are things that you're going to need to remember. These are test questions. This gives you an example of kind of what that position report's all about. Again, as I mentioned, you do have some compulsory reporting points by these solid triangles, as mentioned just now. You have some on-request reporting points that are open triangles, and so you can see kind of what those are. Once you get back in, and where this comes into play, guys, is when you're flying over the mountains and you're not like way up in the flight levels. Because remember how the radar works. Radar is line of sight. So if you have a radar installation that's not on like the top of Mount Evans or whatever and pointing that way, or if you're below a ridge line somewhere, or if the radar station is below here and you're here and they can't see you, then in order for you to stay in the system, to stay with that VFR flight plan, you may be asked to give these position reports in order for them to actually know where you are when you're going to be at the next reporting point. Because if you can't do that, then radar service is terminated, squawk VFR, have a nice day. They've kicked you out of the system. Because if you can't stay up with the MEAs, and you can't stay in that radar system, they'll turf you. They'll get rid of you, especially if they're busy. So just know that that's sort of how that works. And you can read this. Additional compulsory radio reports. These are all test questions here as well. And guys, on chapter 22, I've got to tell you guys, this is where the memorization of stuff begins. Not that it hasn't already. But there's a ton of stuff on this chapter, guys, that you've got to memorize. So just be aware. This here, you have to initiate radio reports without being asked to do this when these conditions are met. So when you're vacating a previously assigned altitude for a new altitude, you gotta let them know. You have to let them know that you're changing altitudes. Because, I mean, just think about it. If you're just out there flying around willy-nilly and just changing altitudes when you feel like it and not letting anybody know, you're a hazard. So just understand kind of how that works. You can read all of these bullet points here about what you have to do, and these are all test questions, okay? All test questions. And when you're not in radar contact, you also have to make these radio reports. So in that instance where you're making those position reports, etc., this is something else that you need to keep in mind, is because if you're not in radar contact, you also have to make these compulsory radio reports here as well. So those three there are their biggies, okay? So you got to know those. En route charts, I'm going to circle this because, well, I say I'm going to circle this. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. Come on, baby. With this right here. All right. So, do you guys remember when I was telling you guys about this? Remember this? You've got to have it available to you constantly, whether it's on an iPad, whether it's on paper, whatever. You've got to have this. The reason being is because we're going to be talking about these things here with regards now, just like we dissected the sectional maps, you're going to have to dissect these low altitude charts. And these en route charts, these are going to be things, this is your legend, to tell you how these things work. Guys, there's no shortcuts here. The only way for you guys to get comfortable with this information is you've got to just sit down and woodshed this information, page by page. You'll remember me telling you that if I sat here and I talked through every single thing that you'd have to know, this class would be 3 years long. So this counts on initiative on your part to be able to go through here and to do this extra reading. There's no shortcut for this. So you've got to go through these en route charts, and you've got them there, L9 and L10, that you have there through Colorado. And you just need to look at the legends, and you need to go through. And what I would do is I would plan a flight. Plan a flight from Aspen to Salt Lake City and say, how would I get there? How would I use the airways to get from Aspen to Salt Lake City in the most efficient fashion? Plan it out. Look at it. How would I fly from Aspen to Denver, to Colorado Springs, to Pueblo, to Santa Fe? How would I do that? And sit down there and plan those things and just look. Look at what all of the different symbols and the symbology means. And you've got to look it up because those are going to be test questions. Now, airports, you can see how the airports are shown. Here you've seen, again, this is in your chart supplement guide or the old AFD, and you can look at these. You can see we've already covered how these things work. Nav aids, VORs, the Vortex, VOR DMEs, all of those, we have covered those as well. The routes that you look at, the routes that you're seeing are from ground-based radio navigation, meaning Victor Airways. You will look at Victor Airways, which are going to be established from one VOR to the next, or they will go from one VOR to a waypoint, and then you make a turn, and then you go to the next VOR, because sometimes they will that's kind of the way these things work. So you look at the Victor Airways, you understand that anytime that you're below 18,000 feet MSL and you're on these airways, they're Victor Airways, it's Class Echo airspace, 8 miles wide. You guys know all of this stuff. You just need to look at these, and you need to force yourself to go through that aeronautical chart user's guide and dissect your low altitude charts so that they make sense. MEAs. These are going to be the altitudes that you have along the routes that you're going to fly that are going to be very important to you. So let's take a look at this. So here we are. This is the sectional map. I just took the weather off of this. So here we are. You can see that we have Denver over here. Here's Colorado Springs. Pueblo's over here. Oh, look, there's Aspen. Here's Grand Junction. Okay, we see this. We see the topography. Now, this is the same map, but this is with the low altitude charts with using the airways. This is the way it looks. You don't have the topography. So now what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to look at these, and you're going to need to determine what does all of this stuff mean. for instance, if I look over here and I'm looking at Victor 108, I can see here that my MEA is 16,400 feet. So that means that the minimum altitude for me to be on this airway is going to be 16,400 feet. However, the thing is that even though that you may see the minimum airway and you're thinking, okay, on a nice cold day, I can get the diamond up here on this Victor airway here, Victor 134, and in this segment, I can be at 16,000 feet on a really cold day. Well, guess what? That may be all well and good. They may not want you that low. They may want you at 18,000 feet. That may be all they allow you. So even though that in the mountains you see these MEAs, you can't count on being able to fly that low. So that's just something that you need to know over mountainous terrain. When you look at things here that's a little bit different, like let's look down here at Louisiana. So now as we look down here at New Orleans, there's the little blue dot. That's where I am right now. Now let's look at the MEAs. Here we go. Between these two VORs, Victor 198 and Victor 552, the MEA is 2,100 feet. Well, I got that. I can do that. I can do higher than that, right? 2,000 feet, 2,000 feet, 3,000 feet, 2,800 feet. So you can see that the MEAs, when you get closer to sea level, are going to be a lot more friendly to aircraft that don't have the high performance of some of the other aircraft. So those are things that you need to kind of keep in mind there as well. Another thing that you can use for practice is that you can go onto the AOPA website, and remember that membership that you guys were getting? You can go on to that and you can actually pull low altitude charts on that for anywhere, and you can take a look at them and practice so that you can see what those things mean as well. Okay? So the MEAs, you can look at this. The MEAs are going to give you radio navigation signal and radio coverage and obstacles. So you can clear obstacles and get good radio signal coverage at the MEAs. All right? Then here you can see approaching an MEA with no MCA, minimum crossing altitude specified. So if there's no minimum crossing altitude specified, you can fly at the previous MEA and begin your climb then after this intersection. If this intersection then goes up to a different MEA on that Victor airway after that intersection, if there's no MCA specified, then you can start your climb after. However, if you have a minimum crossing height, you may need to begin your climb earlier so that, for instance, if your minimum crossing height here happened to be 5,000 feet, you're going to have to start your climb before this. Remember, you've got to let ATC know that you're beginning your climb so you can meet the MCA requirements before this intersection. All right, so you can see that there. There we go. Okay, so here's an example about how that works. And you can see this here, the minimum crossing altitude. When you look, it'll have a little flag, it'll have a number there by it, and it'll tell you what those are. So that gives you an idea about the minimum crossing altitude. Remember, folks, this is all alphabet soup here. I mean, it's just, you know, one acronym after another. But you know where to go to find the guide, right? So, MOCAs. These are going to be those things that will help you clear obstructions, but it may put you below radio and or ground-based radio navigation aids. And that's what the MOCA does. So if you look here at this example, here you are, you're flying along here and you're okay to reach the MOCA, but now you have lost your VOR navigation. Well, what do? Well, if you're still able to maintain radio communication, you may have some compulsory reporting that you have to do on that MOCA. But look at how much better it would be for you to be up at the MEA, and then you don't have to worry about it. Okay? So there you go. MRA, minimum reception altitude. This is going to be another thing here that you kind of need to know, because there, especially in the mountains, you'll notice that most of this stuff applies to the mountains, is that again, with radio signal being line of sight, if you have your transmission stations, your transmitters down lower, they may not be able to shoot through granite. So you have a minimum reception altitude that you have there as well. Changeover points, we talked about that a few weeks ago. Those are those things that show up on a Victor airway to go to tune from one VOR to the next. So here you are with the Victor airway. Here it is. We'll call this Victor 131 through here. There's your Victor airway. And then you may have a changeover point going from tuning from one VOR to the next that's going to kind of look like this. That'll be your changeover point. So that at that point there, you can change, you can tune to the next VOR, because that's normally where you would lose the reception from the VOR that you've been using. All right, maximum authorized altitude. This is going to be like, for instance, in an airspace where they do not want you climbing, you may have, as you're transitioning under Class Bravo airspace, or in some cases Class Charlie airspace, that they may want you to climb to 5,000, but they don't want you to go any higher. If that's a case there, then you may see something along that routing that might look like this. You'll see 5,000 with a solid line above it, saying that you can go to 5,000 feet, but no further. Your MAA is going to be 5,000. We don't want you to climb any more than that. Another way that you might see it is, not this one, but if you see a bar like this, you'll know that you can be a little bit above 5,000 feet, but no lower. We don't want you below 5,000 feet. That solid line under or above that number, that is going to be either your ceiling or your floor. You can also find one like this. You'll see this as your transitioning Class Bravo airspace sometimes, and they want you at 5,000 feet. Period. So you'll have to stay at that 5,000 foot mark until you're able to get another altitude. Maximum authorized altitudes. Flying the airways, you guys know all of this. You know what the airways are. There's that. En route information, you can always contact that here on your EFIS radios. Here. Flight watch, 122.0, it may be 122.1, 122.2. ATC can tell you what it will be for that particular sector, or you can also find it on your G1000 on your MFD with your nearest frequency button. Some of the high WAS stuff that you can see with your VORs, we talked about that. We're going to give you AirMets or SIGMETs, so you guys already have read this and you know what those are. Oxygen at altitude, you already know the rules there. Well done. VFR on top. VFR on top is kind of an interesting animal. What it allows you to do is that, for instance, if you request VFR on top, if you have a cloud layer, and above the cloud layer, which is up there, you know, still somewhere at or above the MEAs, and you can fly above that cloud layer, you can request, they won't offer it to you, but you can request VFR on top. It allows you to basically fly VFR, which you can make some altitude changes there with VFR. But what it also does is you're still sort of in the system, but kind of not really in the system, and you're back to see and avoid, because now they're not going to provide separation for you if you want VFR on top. There are a couple of ways that kind of works for you sometimes, but they're few and far between. Again, I'm just telling you guys what my experience has been with this. Even though that you do have that ability to fly above a layer and it's more comfortable, it's a better ride and blah, 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 just stay IFR. Just keep with the system unless you have a compelling reason not to. So again, you're going to need to know what the rules are for the VFR on top. Again, WEO applies here, because if you're VFR on top, then you go back to all of your basic VFR rules there as well. DME failure. This is one of those things that if you're on a flight and your VOR equipment is required for that flight, for instance, if that's how you filed and you're not flying GPS, for whatever reason, if you're going to be at or above 24,000 feet, you have to have DME. You have to have a way to measure distance. So if that fails above 24,000 feet, you have to let ATC know right then, and you can continue those operations at or above 24,000 feet until you get to that next airport, the intended landing, and then you have to make repairs there. So it's not necessarily declaring an emergency with that, but you do have to let them know that that's failed if that does happen. En route diversions. This is one of those things that it's just going to happen. You're going to have diversions because your plans are going to be great, and then all of a sudden about halfway through your flight they're not so great. So you can understand what you need to do, and you'll constantly be making checking the weather at your point of your destination. Diversions to an alternate. These things right here, these bullet points, these are test questions here also. Okay, so just remember what the legalese of your IFR flight is. It is you have to have enough fuel on board to fly at normal cruise to your point of destination and your alternate, and arrive at that alternate with 45 minutes of fuel. That is going to be the mandatory piece. My personal minimums are, I double that. I want to get to my alternate with an hour and a half of fuel. I have been hung out way too many times to not do that. And so I've got to be pretty doggone confident in that forecast for me to go down to the absolute legal minimums of 45 minutes on the fuel. Minimum fuel. If they get you out there, if things start to get busy, they've got you holding a certain place, or they have vectored you all over the planet trying to get you in somewhere, you need to keep ATC apprised of your fuel situation. And it's better to do that earlier than later. You can get down to the minimum fuel piece, but it's also a good idea to let them know is to say, I am 15 minutes away from my minimum fuel mark, and to give them time to get you through that system. You could say 30 minutes of fuel before I get to my reserves, 15 minutes before I start reaching my reserves. So that's that thing that you have to do. Again, you're not declaring an emergency at this point, but it is, letting ATC know that you're getting to a point that you're gonna have to land. Canceling an IFR flight plan. When you land at a towered airfield, your IFR flight plan is canceled automatically by the tower. If you land at some place that there is not an operating control tower, then you have to call 1-800-WX-BRIEF and cancel your flight plan as soon as you have landed. Remember, the last thing that is on your aircraft checklist is close your flight plan, whether it's a VFR flight plan or an IFR flight plan. So you got to make sure that puppy's closed. Why? Well, you show up if you get 30 minutes outside of a window when you're supposed to be somewhere, people then start gathering around to start looking for you. Okay, it's a great thing to have, but if they start looking for you and you get people out there scouring God knows where, and then a day and a half later they find out that, oh, you're safe and sound, just not where you said you were going to be, you may get a knock at your door one day with a big hefty bill for search and rescue. So keep that in mind. Canceling IFR, we talked about canceling an IFR flight plan when you're coming into another airport, but just remember that when you do that, that it also takes you out of the system. In some cases too, another thing that will happen, and this used to happen in Albuquerque all the time, is, and I'm not suggesting that it's because these guys are lazy or whatever, because they're not. But if you're flying in, because I used to fly in from Aspen to Albuquerque every weekend, and what would happen is that you'd be in the system, and then they'd want you to tell them when you had the airport in sight. The instant you tell them you have the airport in sight, then that gets them off the hook. Then what they do is they close your flight plan for you. They say, radar services, well, okay, now that you've got the field in sight, radar services terminated, squawk VFR, have an awesome day. Click. So there you go. So what I do is I hang on to that as long as I can, because remember, when you're in that system, they are responsible for traffic separation. So they've got to be looking. Now again, if it's a bright sunny day, you should be looking too, even if you are on an IFR flight plan. But you can't just, in my view, just all of a sudden terminate your IFR flight plan too early. So don't do it prematurely. Wait until you're comfortable that you're there, and then once you're 10 miles out, you have the airport, everything looks good, and that's when you can say Albuquerque approach, Diamond Star 141 Hotel Lima, I have Double Eagle Airfield in sight. And normally they can't wait to jump on the radio and say, radar services terminated, squawk VFR, have a great day. So that's kind of it. So just know that the instant that you relent into that, canceling that IFR, you're on your own. And sometimes that's okay. Sometimes that's the way you want it. But just know that that's sort of how it is. Now, again, guys, a lot of studying, a lot of memorizing on this chapter, on chapter 22, okay? Also, on the en route phase in big red, there's a lot of information, and you're going to be looking at these charts. I cannot stress enough the importance of of this binder. I keep pushing the wrong button here. The Aeronautical Chart User's Guide. It is an invaluable source of information for VFR and IFR information, as well as airspace, as well as weather. So there's a lot of stuff on here, guys, and it is one of the most useful of all FAA publications that I am aware of. It is a big, big help. So get that puppy out there where you can either do it on paper or make sure that you have it available to you here for you to use. It is a great study guide, and it is a great practical guide when you're flying the airplane. Okay, so there's that. Now, there will be a quiz coming up here after en route. So I know that you guys have got the quiz coming up here with regard to the departures, airspace, and the others. So that should already be done. Now we jump in here to en route. The next thing that's going to happen is a quiz on en route. So that'll be scheduled there with Mrs. Benton, and she will tell you when that's going to happen. But that will happen here this week. So just know that that's coming up, because again, our march toward the finish line continues. Next chapter up is going to be chapter 23, so if you get comfortable with all of the material, you're good in big red, you are set to go for the quiz. Start pre-reading chapter 23. Like I said, guys, stuff starts to come at you fast and furious. There we go. Guys, have an awesome day, and I will talk to you soon with chapter 23. See ya.